Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
Hey everybody, welcome back and thank you so much for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast. Mariano Alvarez here with Brent Labrada and yet another very special guest that we'll be announcing in just a second. But first, we do want to let you guys know that you can find us on all major social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, all by searching Dog Trainers Podcast as all one word, Dog Trainers Podcast. You can also find us on all major podcast platforms. And we want to give a quick shout out to those cities that have been showing us love with our latest episode with Larry Crone. Larry was an awesome guest, you guys, and we thank you so much for listening. And we thank you so much for the questions that you sent us. And we want to give a shout out to Columbus, Ohio, Atlanta, Georgia, Dublin, Leinster, and Ireland, and Sheffield, England. Thank you guys so much. And with that, over to you, man.
What's up, guys? It's Brent with the Dog Trainers Podcast. As Mariano said, we have an amazing special guest. Those of you guys who follow us on Instagram, you guys already know who it is. There was a huge spoiler alert. You guys made a huge stink about not knowing who it is that we are interviewing. So from this point on, we are now going to let you guys know who we're interviewing. We were always trying to keep it a surprise. But if you guys were watching us on Instagram, you guys know that today's very, very special guest is Mr. Blake Rodriguez. How are you, my friend?
Not bad. Thank you for having me, guys. I really do appreciate it.
Of course. It's our pleasure. And thank you so much for it's an honor, really, just being on to have a fellow great dog trainer on board. Some of you guys already follow him on Instagram, but if you guys don't follow him, you guys can go ahead and check him out at Dream Come True Canine. And you guys could also follow his website, www.dctk9, dreamcometruecanine.com. All in letters. And then you guys can also check out some of his contributions to the Consider the Dog platform by our buddy Tyler Muto. And he has a lot of content on there. I've actually learned a couple things myself watching some of your content, Blake. So we'll talk about that a little bit later in the podcast. But yeah, man. So let's go ahead and jump off this podcast. Very similarly, let's tell people who are not familiar with you what it is you do and who the hell you are.
Sounds good. Well, I'm a dog trainer, and a lot of people ask, well, how the hell did you get into that? It's interesting. I really think that my story is similar to a lot of people in general. Is I had a great dog, but and everybody, that's like the recurring trend. That's the recurring theme for everybody. And it's like, oh, my dog is so great, but, and then those buts will be really mild. Those buts will be severe. It can be like, but he chases squirrels, but he's not good.
But he killed the cat.
Yeah, but he killed the cat. But he doesn't get along with people, and he's only friends with our family.
Yeah.
There's always a but. I had a dog in college, and even before that, my roommate's dog, but I had a dog in school, and he was a great dog, but. And we had a lot of butts. And the thing that was really interesting for me was I didn't have an excuse like a lot of people. Technically, I guess you can qualify him a rescue because he was kind of a one-night stand litter in upstate New York in the middle of nowhere. The mother abandoned him and the litter, and he was like living under the stairs. So the neighbor spoke to my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time. He was like, listen, we have these pups. We sold a couple. Some died. We have some, you can take 1, 2, as many as you want. So Lindsay went ahead and took him, and he was like really young. Like the mother wasn't feeding him or anything. He was like 5 weeks old, really, really young. And we rescued him, but we didn't have the rescue backstory the way that everybody else did. So like any behavior that I was dealing with, struggling with, or, struggling to teach, whatever the case is in that situation, I had no excuse. I didn't have the backstory of like, he was a Hurricane Katrina dog, or he had been attacked by another dog, or this, that, or the third. There was no excuse. So I either did something that contributed to my struggle, or I wasn't doing something that was contributing to my success in what I was trying to teach. So that kind of really inspired and motivated me to say, okay, there's a way to fix this. There has to be a way. And that led to me walking dogs in New York City. I guess I'll jump into the long story now, because that's where we're headed.
No,
anyway.
please. We want the long story on the Dog Trainers Podcast.
This makes sense. So I had this dog who was great, and I ended up leaving school, and now I had a dog in New York City. Very, very different environment from where I went to school, upstate New York, SUNY Potsdam. It's like, it is New York, but it's like 6.5 hours from New York City. So it is a very different New York than New York City.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I had this dog and he was great, but now I had him in New York, the concrete jungle, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I started fixing the butts. And along the journey of fixing the butts, I had a great idea to basically make money doing what I was going to do anyway.
Nice.
And it was like, listen, if I have to take my dog to the dog park or I have to walk, I'm gonna have to do this. People have 9-to-5 jobs. What if I can get paid to take their dog? Now I could take their dog to the dog park and my dog has like company. So I'm gonna be outside, my dog's gonna get fulfilled, he's gonna have an outlet, but I can make money doing it.
Right.
That led to me learning that walking into someone's apartment and picking up dogs, trying to grab them, it's not as easy as you think.
As you think, yeah.
So I learned a lot, and I learned that as a dog walker, I needed to become a dog trainer, essentially.
Right.
I learned a lot through trial and error, still continue to do so till this day, and then started training dogs because I was good at it, even though I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Mm-hmm. That started the journey of, okay, let me start learning about what I am doing, which brings me to where I am today. That is the long-winded version of answering your question.
No, I love that.
I have a 2-floor dog training facility in New York City, and you guys are the first to hear this news. We're actually expanding to an additional facility down the block.
That's awesome, man.
Dope. Congratulations. That's so cool.
Thank you. We have 2 locations. We're in the middle of working out this lease right now, but good friends with the landlords and everything. So
it should work out.
Yeah, exactly. It should work out. It should work out. We should be good to go to get the keys in April, have a month to kind of spruce the place up. And then by May, we'll have one location that is focusing exclusively on board and trains and training. Mm-hmm. And then another facility that is for exclusive services, which is our train and play, which is kind of like our version of daycare.
Yep.
And our boarding outside of board and train. That's only the dogs that we've worked with and done some type of training with. Yep. They don't have to be perfect. I just have to know you, know your dog, know that we're on the same page, and really, really exciting news.
No, I love that. I love because we at my company we have like a we only board dogs we've trained kind of thing.
Same.
Because we're smaller. We're smaller, definitely not 2 facilities yet, which we'll talk about. But yeah, there's definitely a huge benefit to that, right?
Absolutely. You know what's crazy too is I think that from the owner's perspective, they really enjoy that. You know what's crazy, you guys, is when I first moved here. So to give you some backstory, Blake, and then we'll let you continue. Sorry, brother. Brent lives in LA. I used to live in LA. That's how we know each other. We used to work together. Mm-hmm. And I live now in Phoenix, Arizona. I've lived here for close to 2 years. Next month will be 2 years. And when I moved here, of course, you uproot yourself from state to state. You don't have your client base anymore. So I started over in a sense, but not really. I mean, I knew what I was doing at that point. I just had to start over with the clients. So it was a quicker process. But with that being said, I was nervous. Like, how do you compete with this kennel that can take in this many dogs and they're booked out through September and so on, until I realized it was an edge for me because I was able to just kind of adjust my website around to be like, hey, listen, guys, so here in my home, we focus on a more individual, a more boutique style of training. And like people really are into that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but I think that's so amazing that you're able to separate your training facility. You have a training center, and then you have a kind of like a more daily use type of services. That's so cool.
Yeah, it's smart. Yeah.
You know what happened is when we first got the facility, it was fantastic because I started training out of my apartment in New York City. And for those of you that are not familiar with it, you have someone that lives above you, beneath you, to the left, to the right of you. It's a very different world. And I started doing board and trains out of my apartment.
Yep, me too.
My neighbors liked me. They loved me. I was doing good. I got really good at like getting results right away
and keeping them quiet.
Which which has its pros and cons. That's obviously something that we can sort of jump into. And it was an approach that taught me a lot. Yeah. But as time went on, I was like, all right, I'm going to need an actual facility. And when I got the facility, it was great. It was like, wow, we're not going to outgrow this place. This is going to be fantastic. It got to the point where we sort of outgrew it. And although we're doing a really good job now, one of the main reasons why I'm looking to take on additional rent in New York City for this space is not because we're going to be making that much more money. If we're going to be making money at all, we're going to keep the number of board and trains the same. It's literally just to give the dogs more. Yeah. Because we're limited to the space that we have. And it's like, we're doing good work, but I think we could do better.
Okay.
So that's where we are.
That's amazing. And it's about the quality of the work. It's about the quality of care. It's about,
It does matter. It does matter.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Because you hear all these horror stories of like that board and train facility that has crates stacked on top of each other, and it's noisy and it's smelly and it's dirty, and it gets to this point where you're like, your standard has to be here, and if it's down here, the dogs will show it. The dogs will show it.
And it's been really annoying lately, and this is going to kind of lead into my next question is one thing that really bothers me, like maybe you've been aware of this kind of thing too, is it seems lately like there's a push of dog training that's very like advertiser friendly. Like any dog, 2 weeks, any you know what I mean? Like cookie cutter type. I guarantee you any dog off leash in 2 weeks, period. When that's just not the reality. And we don't name and slam people and stuff like that here. But with that being said, like here in the area, when I got here a couple of years ago, I was new. I didn't have any clients, so I applied at different kennels, and I got a job at a kennel while I established myself. And I met a couple people who ran a similar type program like that. And just after hearing more about the program, I'm like, man, really? Like, what if the dog, XYZ? What if this or that? And I thought it was strange that there was no like nuance. So I guess my question to you then is really being inspired by the way that you're willing to take on the extra expense just to give the dogs more, to really make sure that your service is the best it can possibly be. Who or what influenced that sort of mindset?
That's a great question. At the end of the day, when you're in it for the dogs and you actually care about them, the money's going to come. Like
right.
Obviously this is a career. It's not a hobby. So you want to make money doing it, but
right.
You want to be able to give the dogs more. You want to be able to help them. So one of the things like for me is like I mentioned before, I got really good at like doing things quickly, but I also started realizing that it went way beyond what I can get with a dog. Like in some cases within 24 hours, if a dog is with me, like we're going to see a very different dog, and that's great. And that's good for video. And that's,
right.
That's fantastic, but it doesn't necessarily translate or transfer over to the client.
Right.
So that's not to say that I need to have a dog, or I want to have a dog for a year. And then after I have a dog for a year, here's your dog, you'll never have issues. Mm-hmm. But if you could think of us as trainers, as dancing teachers, mm-hmm. Dancing with the Stars or something. If you look at Dancing with the Stars, you guys ever see that show?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh yeah.
With Dancing with the Stars, you have a celebrity or somewhat of a celebrity
right.
with a professional.
Right.
Right.
And you still see how difficult it is to
right.
teach these people how to dance.
Yep.
Even some people that have like
performance experience,
Backstreet Boys performance backgrounds, it is a challenge.
Right.
But they have a partner who can dance.
Right.
I think the benefit of our training, whether it's private sessions, especially if it's a board and train, is my goal is how do I give this human mm-hmm. that in most situations doesn't have the ability to dance, mm-hmm. how do I give them the best possibility or the best shot at being successful with doing that? I have to give them a partner that knows how to dance.
Right.
So that's our job with the dog is, listen, we're going to get you to as good of a place as possible because we know it's still just a piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. It's an end piece. Mm-hmm. It's a very important piece of the jigsaw puzzle, but it's not the full puzzle. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Definitely.
So, that's the inspiration right there. It's like, how do you get things better? So if you look at these 2 weeks, these 1 weeks, 24 hours, this and that, I know you can get progress within that, but what about the lasting results?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's really most of the inspiration. So you look at board and trains, it's 3, 6, 8 week program.
Well, that's a very cool idea you're bringing up. So we just had Larry Crone on before you. And Larry Crone was talking about, he goes, the big thing a lot of dog trainers are missing are a dog might come into a board and train and they might do excellent under the structure of that system. And as soon as the dogs go back home, obviously because things are not as regimented or as structured, naturally there's some fall off, right? The dog starts falling off. And it's because, every day the trainer would play tug and every day the trainer would ask commands or every day the trainer would do work on impulse control, but that's not how real life works with the average dog owner. So he was saying, he goes, one of the big things that I focus on is I like to make sure that I know the family and I work on things that I know they're going to be able to do. And I make sure that the dog's results and structure revolves around those things versus telling somebody you gotta jog, you gotta run 2 miles a day with this dog, or you gotta constantly you gotta buy one of those treadmills and put the dog on the treadmill, or and that's one of the big things. What I've noticed is when I was a younger dog trainer, I would teach people how I would train their dog, and I would try and make them like me, versus customizing a program, or at least coming up with resources where we could say, okay, for person A, there's this style. For person B, there's this D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and have slightly different approaches that can yield similar results and same results. And I think that just kind of comes with the mastery of the craft, right? You run into a brick wall and then you go, how can I help this person? And then you figure out, okay, what service could I provide?
How do you make it work for them? Yeah. And shout out to Larry. I love Larry. I really think he's doing a fantastic job, not only with the dogs, but getting material out and just at the end of the day, helping people. And also striving to continue to get better, even though he's already good at what he's doing. I think that's something that's important for all of us to strive for.
Oh, 100%. And I think if there's anything that we could try and offer as a podcast is, again, these conversations, right? Like it's interesting because, there are obviously people we looked up to, right? And it's weird, right? Like, who was it? I forget who said it, but it's like, just because you have a platform, people all of a sudden look you on this pedestal.
Yeah, it's like this weird Hollywood effect. Like when we had, I'm trying to think of who the guest was that they jumped on with us and they were like, wow, guys. And we're like, what? It's thanks, I guess.
And we're just like, we just started this a year ago. Like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's weird. But anyways, and I bring that up because, there are people with clout that deserve it. They've been busting their ass. They've been innovative. They've been, putting work in. We've been putting our work in. I've been doing this 13 years now. Mariano, like 9-10 years now. Yep. And it's like, but that's the point I'm trying to make is, like, at some point you stay in the game long enough where you're working, you're developing skill, and you just keep your head down and you're working. And it gets to this point where now people start to notice, like, hey, you're a different level than I am, or, and so a question I have for you is, obviously we all started off as scrubs at some point, right? Who were some of the people that you looked up to when you were starting dog training and you were that dog walker being like, who the fuck do I learn from? Who were those people that you were like, I study blank, I read this, I do that? Please let us know.
That's a good question. And it goes beyond just dog trainers. At the time that I started, this is a little bit weird, and you guys will understand this, but at the time that I started, it's gonna make me seem old. Facebook wasn't really a thing.
Right.
YouTube was still just sort of becoming a thing. Like Tyler and I met.
Like 2007, 2008.
YouTube.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? Where I was like, I would look up like NYC, like dog training, or at New York dog training, and he would pop up. I was like, let me watch this video. And like, he was one of the first people that, showed some of the work. It wasn't just before or after. It was shows like, okay, I think this guy actually knows what he's doing. This is interesting. And if I'm doing some stuff that a lot of things I'm just winging, and some of it is working, some of it is not, you're figuring it out. If I'm doing a routine 20 things with every single dog, let's say, I know that I'm getting results, but I technically don't know, out of those 20 things, what is it that's really working? Do I only need to be doing 5? Do I only need to be doing 10? So I started watching him. Prior to watching him, and I know people have mixed feelings about him. Like, Caesar was the man. He was the only guy on television.
Yeah.
He was doing this stuff. It was incredible. Like, it's just incredible. So I was watching that. I was trying to replicate that. I was learning stuff. I was learning what worked, what didn't work, all of these things. So those were like the two major influences early on. And then I also got connected to Sherry Lucas and Brian Agnew through them, and then started attending seminars like after that with various different people, and benefited from everybody,
Right.
That's awesome, man.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, was in your particular discipline, like what I see from you, like on Instagram, like good stuff is kind of like we talked about just before we went live, is I notice a lot of dog trainers that are technically very good. Their timing, their marking, they're all that good stuff, the motivation with the dogs and the engagement. It's rare to find a trainer that's on your level when it comes to communicating your thoughts and to like meticulously explaining the little things that bring something to life. I was just watching your video earlier, like 90 minutes ago, on Instagram, that was in reference to how you can use food and hand signals and leash pressure to blend each other together, working sits and downs. And it's something that I've only really noticed outside of you and Tyler Muto. The only other person I've really seen, Michael Ellis, is I was going to say, so I want to hear a little bit more about, what was it that drove you to really realize that was a thing that people struggle with, is like a lot of people can do it, but not a lot of people can explain. And you know what? Here, I'm sorry. I'm going to spoil the joke right now.
No, don't do it. Don't do it.
It's going to help me.
No, do it.
Don't do it.
It's going to help me.
I'm going to pour more wine.
It's going to help me make my point, though. And I know, Blake, you're going to understand exactly what I'm talking about. So you and I are officially legal best friends because when I found out that you do jujitsu, I was like, no fucking way. Wow. Because I do too. And so Brent gets annoyed because I talk about it a lot on the podcast and how
every episode talking about jiu-jitsu.
But I saw that
we're going to talk about it this
yeah, absolutely, yeah. But I saw the things I saw that you do too, and we'll get into it more. But what I wanted to kind of bring up right now was, this struggle right here. You have instructors of a good school. These guys are legit. They're like competition tested. They're good. But when they're explaining something, sometimes they don't explain it right. Like a lot of times it's like, okay, so you grab the lapel grip here, you do this here, and then they just make noises like, and then boom, and they flip the guy, and you're like, no, I know, but what's boom though? One of the
contract the abdomen, twist, rotate, tuck your leg under.
One of my favorite things that one of our instructors does is he'll snap his hand, because when two guys are wearing gis, it's easy to lose your like extremities and all just the white or the blue, like it's just two gis. So he'll do something like this. He'll be like, guy has him in like kind of modified like side back control, so dude's on his back off to the side like this, like a wrestler, stance.
You totally just lost Brent right now. He's
yeah, you're right. But to give you guys an idea, so one guy's on top of another guy, both guys are wearing gis, so like you can't really see much of their actual body because the gis are big. And all he has to do to make this so much more informative for me is when he's explaining things, okay guys, so my left hand, and he does this, and he picks his hand up and snaps it so that when he puts it back down, you can follow it. And then my left foot, and he taps it on the mat so you can find it. And then when he's doing things, and then like, okay, so the flip's halfway over. All right, guys, my right hand. And he points things out. And I'm like, why don't more people point that out? Because I watch BJJ videos online. I watch competition. I watch all these other guys in real life. We go to different gyms and like, try them out. Not that many people think to do that. They just say things and like kind of assume what they're saying.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? And in dog training, I noticed a similar thing.
It's interesting that you bring that up because I had gotten to a point where I knew that if I just got my hands on the dog, or if I hung out with the dog, if I spent time with the dog, like I could do it.
Yep.
But why was I struggling to get them to be able to do it? Or the way that I saw it in the beginning was not that way. Why are they struggling to do what I'm showing them to do? Like how come they can't do it?
Right.
It's so easy, right? It's so easy.
Like all you gotta do is this. So you look at it, and certain things that are simple for us that we do without thinking, that are like reflexive at this point, are not necessarily reflexive or instinctual for them.
Right.
And that actually really correlates with BJJ and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and this is the most fascinating thing. So I don't even know how long I've been training now, maybe 4 years. I might be getting close to like 5.
Okay. Are you purple? I forget.
You want to know what's funny? I should be like a 3-stripe purple, but COVID. And also me going back and forth between Florida and New York. That's okay. So I've been a 4-stripe blue for like for like over 2 years now, man. And I train like every day, which is really interesting. But for me, what was really fascinating. So for those of you that are not familiar with the martial art jiu-jitsu,
this is where I leave. I'm just joking.
This is actually really interesting.
Yeah, it is. No, it is. I'm just fucking with you guys.
When you look at this martial art, and this is not to knock other martial arts, but in order to get a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, it's going to take you anywhere from 7 to 10 years.
Right. And
for those that are hitting 7, you're doing this every single day.
Right. You're a beast. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're a savage. So this is not a 2-month course. This is not an online thing. This is not my kid was a black belt at 12 years old sort of thing.
Right.
This is, you're committed to this craft. Now, when you look at these black belts, you have a stripe on a black belt, which is a degree.
Right.
It's 3 years for every single black belt. So you'll have some black belts that have 3 stripes on their black belt. That means that like 369, you've been a black belt for 9 years, and it's possible that it's taken you 9 years to get to this place. So you've been doing this for 18 years of your life.
Right.
Wow. Yeah.
But somebody that's been doing anything for 18 years of their life, you were doing things without thinking.
Mm-hmm.
Like your level of thinking is so advanced without realizing it that simple maneuvers you do not think about. So now you have a white belt, a brand new person that goes, I want to learn how to do this.
Yep.
And you go, where do I start? So you try to teach him something, and it's just like, whoa. This was easy for me, but it's clearly not easy for you. Jiu-jitsu has made me a better teacher for dog training, because when you look at a black belt's ability to articulate something as simple as like a hip escape, a basic movement or something, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
Do you remember what it was like when you first started to do that? It was like, wait, how do you do it? And now it's, you do it without thinking. Mm-hmm. I started focusing on how do I break dog training down in more basic movements or basic steps, the way that jiu-jitsu practitioners do. Mm-hmm. And that's actually what's made me a better teacher. They have the ability to do this. If they can teach a random Joe how to get better at this martial art and get to black belt status, there's no reason why we can't do this with dogs. Mm-hmm. It's just a matter of breaking it down the same way. And in the beginning, it might be a little bit boring. In the beginning, it might be so basic that you're like, no, but I just want to get to this point. I just want to do this with my dog.
You're like, patience, grasshopper, patience.
Exactly. And then it's always trying to find that balance with being fair of like, I want to be fair to the dog. I want to, shameless plug, consider the dog.
Hey, what's up, Tyler?
I want to consider the dog in the learning process, in your learning process.
Right.
So I want to slow things down, but I also don't want to drain your pocket and say, we're just going to spend all this time on fundamentals when you have pressing issues. Right. So how do we like bridge that gap of like getting you results as quickly as possible in a way where we're not skimping over things and stressing the dog out and doing too much too soon?
Right. That's huge.
That's a whole nother wormhole and topic within itself, you know?
I mean, you guys should do your own episode just by yourself.
Well, you know, I promise you, Brent, I'm bringing it back to dog training right now. So here's...
Literally, you can count, and the audience knows. Well, at least 20 episodes talking about jiu-jitsu.
There's nothing wrong with jiu-jitsu.
And I love jiu-jitsu. I'm really just hating.
I know.
My discipline, I was a dancer and a performer. So like the rinse, repeat, rehearse, like that's where I pull inspiration from. But I do want to do a martial arts. Like what if there was an influx, just this episode, what if there was an influx of dog trainers doing jiu-jitsu just because?
Dude, that's a thing.
A lot of them do.
Yeah?
Yeah, a lot of them do.
Yeah.
Oh, well, fuck, maybe I'm just behind. I'm
I
behind.
just want you to know that I'm being considerate of both of you, because we spend time talking about jiu-jitsu and then we spend time talking about Dancing with the Stars. So I'm here for the both of you guys.
Okay? You did your research. Thanks, man.
He's like, welcome to considerthedogtrainer.com. But yeah, man, so to tie it back in a little bit, and you were talking about it's easy for the black belt, not necessarily the white belt. And it's easy for the more experienced dog trainer and not necessarily for the client or the newer dog trainer. Mm-hmm. What I found to be very interesting, now I'm speaking from the perspective of the newer dog trainer, is Brent and I like to bring up this point, is for newer dog trainers, it's imperative, especially in today's day and age, how training has just advanced so crazy with social media. You have to know your disciplines, not just food work, not just leash work, not just remote collar, not just, all these different things. Be good at all of it. However, to not overwhelm somebody like a white belt, pick one, find a game and work your game. And obviously, the job of the competitors to like not let you find the game because they have their game, right? So it's the whole thing of like, well, the dog is reactive or whatever, but I know what I know, get really good at that one thing, get super good. And then as you get a little bit better, blue belts explore. All right, that's the difference in a white and a blue. Like good white belts versus brand new blue belts is now you're good enough at your game that you can deviate off the game. Because if something goes sideways, you can find your way back. Yeah. Right. Purple belts, really solid blue belts. They explore more and more and more. And what somebody told me totally changed my perspective in jiu-jitsu and in dog training. When you become a black belt, it's the day you become a white belt again. That's when jiu-jitsu is new to you all over again. And you just try everything because you have what you need now to really explore as far as you can, because you'll never find yourself in a position to where you can't find your way back home. And from a dog training perspective, younger trainers struggle, in my experience, a lot with things like, I feel awkward when I walk into somebody's house for the first time. I don't know them. I'm in their home. I'm telling them what to do. It's like a private lesson situation. Or I know my stuff, but I'm not quite comfortable commanding a group of 8 people with 8 different dogs and, and stuff like that. And so I'll notice that, and they do a good job. They stick to the script, and it's good. They do their thing. But I noticed the real experienced guys, like jiu-jitsu players, they're calm and they're cool and they play around and they make jokes and they do their thing because they're comfortable with, like, all right, guys, let's get back to work, and then they jump right back into the dog training. So that was kind of what I wanted to bring up, and I wanted to hear your thoughts on, agree, disagree, or it's nice, I think, for the newer trainers, stick to a plan, get good at something, a very viable method, something that's like ridiculous, of course, but then adventure, you're solid in this.
Yeah, well, I think that the biggest thing is, what is it that on average the dog and the owner need consistently? That's actually why I spent time putting out the communication course. In one of my last videos on Consider the Dog, I talk about the pieces that make up a relationship, and there's so many things that go into it, and there's so many people who like focus on this and focus on that, and they're all really, really important. But it's very hard to do any of that stuff when you can't communicate clearly and effectively to your dog. So let's focus on basic communication, something that you can do using these things. And then from there, if you can communicate to your dog, now you can jump into this, now you can jump into that, now you can focus on building routine, now you can focus on building rules, or teaching this or teaching that or stopping this. And if I was to sum up communication, there's really kind of only 3 things that you need to focus on. Or you need to know how to do in order to communicate clearly and effectively. At a very bare basic level, you have to know how to get more of something, you have to know how to get less of something, and you have to know how to condition something.
Yeah.
Condition, basically give meaning. If you know how to give meaning to things, you can give meaning to a leash, a remote collar, to the rules of a game.
I love that.
What time it is with this. You understand how to classically condition. Like that by itself, that starts with fundamentals of teaching, like markers and a reinforcement-based foundation.
Right.
Condition these markers and give meaning. Then I can take the fundamental principles of this to condition this, to condition this. And once I have a basic foundation, we can now problem solve because we have a language. Getting more and getting less of something, getting more of something is essentially your reinforcement.
Right.
Like anything that we do that's going to increase
increase behavior. Yeah.
Right.
We're going to get more of the behavior. We have to understand reinforcement for what it is.
Right.
Reinforcement gets more of behaviors. And I think that's a big problem with like dog training today, is that the world understands the value of reinforcement to an extent, but we don't understand the limitations of what it actually is. Like you don't want to be in the business of reinforcing bad behavior.
Right. And which happens accidentally all the time.
And it's such a common sense thing. But for some reason, like online, you'd be like, oh, well, the dog was lunging at your face. You should have just used positive reinforcement to like,
give it a cookie to make it tell it it's all right.
It's just like, like reinforcement is valuable. I'm not knocking it, but that's not how this works. Reinforcement gets more behavior. So you can teach an alternative behavior, but you have to address the issue at hand. And this is where punishment comes in, which is what gets less of behavior. Obviously, there's more detail to it.
Sure.
But people, for some reason, associate punishment with abuse.
Yes.
That's not what it is.
100%.
I really don't try to get into too much of this, but I do try to make it clear, because if I'm ever going to throw terms around loosely with clients down the road, like we need to reinforce this, we need to punish this, I want my clients to know what that is. Some people associate punishment with abuse, and I try to make it clear by saying, look, let's assume that I was being abusive to a dog. However, like I don't know, I was being abusive by way of leash.
Right.
If my dog lunges at your face and I choose to be abusive with the dog, and the next time around that we find ourselves in the same situation, you come around and my dog, with no hesitation, no decrease in likelihood, still lunges at your face, even though I was abusive to the dog, I didn't punish anything.
Right.
Because I didn't see less of a likelihood of the dog repeating the behavior. So punishment shouldn't be associated with that. I know.
Right.
it's such an important kind of piece of the puzzle. Reinforce, punishment, condition, and then we can build.
I hear you on that. And I think I want to add to, and this is just like a spitball idea. So people, please don't crucify me. I haven't quite thought this through yet. Something that I thought of, like, as you were saying this, was what is the definition of a punisher, an effective punisher versus cruel and unusual? One of them is effective. And by effective, you cannot overcorrect a dog, because then that loses efficiency, because then the dog shuts down, stresses out, can bite you, or whatever the case. So in order to be effective, you have to be on target. It's our job. I'm very upfront about this with clients and stuff like that. It's our job as trainers, just even if we were doing strictly pure positive work, it's going to be stressful. We're changing the dog's life around. We're building new habits. We're destroying old habits. We're doing all these things, even if it's the most motivational, lighthearted training you've ever seen. Just by the nature of the beast, it's going to be stressful because it's different. It's change.
Yeah.
That being said, not my job to stress the dog any more than is absolutely necessary. Now, there is some stress that will be necessary. There's some change that's necessary, especially if a dog's lunging at someone's face. I have one right now. It's a cattle dog.
I love cattle dogs.
I love cattle dogs. He's a cutie too.
I grew up with 4 of them, so little assholes.
He's a little stubby thing. He's cute, man. But proper, effective, efficient corrections, that is the difference. Did it even help, or were you just punishing this poor dog? Or a different word. Were you just wasting your time?
Exactly. Yeah.
So that's kind of the delineation that popped into my head right now, was like, is what you're doing working? Because if it's not, then you're just correcting. There is no upside. You're just correcting this dog.
Another way to look at it is people go, well, what do you mean about like punishment, this and that? I was like, well, the dog technically defines what is punishment or what is punishing and what is reinforcing.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I try to tell people this all the time. If you, Brent, were abused by a gentleman with a beard like me, who has a same color shirt, same style hair, and I'm trying to, I don't know, like, let's say you're a dog. I try to teach you to sit, and every single time that you sit, I walk over to you
and touch me. You're like, this is not positive. Yeah.
If you're viewing that as like, oh my gosh, I really don't enjoy that, I could technically be punishing that.
Yeah, true.
Right.
Yeah. What does the dog perceive as reinforcement or punishment?
Right.
Yeah.
I have to see that, and like punishment could be anything. It could be abusive. It doesn't have to be reinforcement. Really,
could be the most. Yeah, it could be something weird, like go sniff. That's something.
Right.
Yeah. So when people understand things for what they actually are, it gets away from all the what is politically correct and what is online. Let's keep it simple.
Yeah.
Do we want to get more of this behavior? Let's find a way to reinforcement. Do we want to get less of this? Let's punish in a way that makes sense to the dog. The dog.
Well, I was just with a client yesterday. This is a client who kind of a timid puppy. Did obedience training when it was 4 to 6 months old. They just moved to a new house. Because they got a house, they gave the dog all this freedom. They got rid of the crate, they got rid of everything. And within a month, the dog starts getting territorial of the new house and starts barking at postmen and doing all this stuff. Because prior to this, they lived on the 3rd story of an apartment and they didn't have to deal with this stuff. And I went to go do a follow-up. I give free follow-ups for the rest of the dog's life. I follow up with them, make sure it's a rescue dog, make sure it doesn't ever have to go back to the rescue. So I'm looking at what's going on. I'm reading the dog's body language. And the funny thing is the dog knows me and likes me. Should know, should be happy to see me. And when I walk in, the dog is like, who the F is that? And I'm just like, uh-oh, relationship. Something's wrong here. So I see the dog is pierced up against the owner's like, rah, 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 rah. And I'm just like, guys, put her over there. And they're like, you want to sit down? You want a bed command? I said, no, just literally grab her leash, put her over there. And then they're like, but no commands? And I was like, no, just grab her, remove her from you. And she calms down. And then I go to give him a hug. The dog freaks out and guards them. Right? I said, grab her, move her over there. Grab her, move her over there. We did that 4 or 5 times. Then the dog relaxed. And then the dog went, hey, I know you, right? Just something so simple like that. Just so simple where there's that was the punishment. That was I'm not going to reinforce this. I'm not going to support you on this. I'm just going to remove you from this. And
the big thing with that to add is understanding that we have a job, we have a responsibility, we have roles that we have to play. And dogs are such good companions, and they're such instinctual companions that when a responsibility is not being done on another family member or pack member's end, you will have certain dogs, and the majority of dogs, that will try to step up to the plate and help in any way that they see fit. What tends to happen, and you hear this all the time, you're like, oh, but you don't understand. My dog is actually really nervous, or my dog is really skittish, or my dog is really insecure. Those are the dogs that tend to be the dogs that get territorial or get possessive or develop extreme separation anxiety and all of these things. And a lot of the reason is because in their eyes, when their pack or their family member or their human is not doing certain things, let me try to handle the responsibility. Now, if I'm a nervous dog and I feel I have to guard the territorial den or the space, or if we're out on a walk, our bubble as things are approaching us, I'm going to look to create space in any way that I can. So this is the majority of like leash reactivity, is a dog that is insecure and nervous and saying, stay away from us, we're really nervous. And I'm reactive. What happens when a dog is reactive? The owner tends to pull that dog away. Right.
The dog gets the space it was asking for.
Yeah. Or that owner pulls their dog away and gets space.
Or on the street, they just walk past, you know?
Yeah. Got the job done.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Handled it, guys.
I got it.
I love explaining that to people with mailman syndrome.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So understanding the value that space has, how to control space so that a dog can feel, okay, it's not my job. So they can feel at the very least relieved with that, opens up the window for us to then start the counter conditioning process, which is basically changing the way that a dog might at this point involuntarily feel about a situation. But it's very hard to start the process of getting you to feel better when I can't control the space and show you that I've got it, I'm responsible for it. This is no longer your job. I got a promotion.
Right. How do you teach? So like I teach space privilege and resource, right? Like an owner should be able to control space privileges and resources. And I make a, comparison to children as like a teenager. You can't make them physically to do shit. So what you can do is you can exercise control over space, privilege, and resource, right? So that's my go-to, right, explanation of that concept. And, when I'm trying to teach people, like, why not on the couch? Why not pulling? Why not this? Why not that? Well, sometimes I have to just teach them, that. What is your angle? Because I think this might be helpful for young dog trainers who may not know how to put it to words or how to put it into, a 3-step system or a 4-step, whatever system. How do you teach that?
For just space in general, and
for space, or just basic
just too much freedom,
relationship components that owners should take care of. That's not obedience. Stuff that isn't obedience that should be handled.
There's a lot that kind of goes into it, and there's a lot of different ways that you can cover it based on the situation at hand. What I can go ahead and say from the beginning is, if you are struggling outside, which for a lot of dog owners, they're like, oh, like everything is fine in the house. Like
except for outside.
Totally okay. You don't understand, when we get outside or when we get to the dog park or when we're blah, 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 this is where we're seeing the issues. The dog won't listen to me.
Right.
Well, let me ask you a question. Inside the house where you're not struggling, what direction does the dog ever have to follow? And I don't mean direction by way of like militant, commands, like leader or anything like that, but at any point, are you giving your dog direction that goes against what they impulsively want to do?
Yeah. Are they accountable to anything?
Yeah, and that could be for simple stuff. If you have a dog that's clingy, that follows you, you go to the bathroom, follows you into the bathroom. You go to the couch, it's on the couch. You go to the bed, it goes to the bed with you. The second you go to the kitchen, you grab like a bag that's crinkly and your dog runs over and it jumps on you and you tell it to sit and you feed it.
Right.
Instead of that, try interrupting the impulsive movement. That would allow a dog to get closer in proximity to the resource or the situation it wants. Not because that behavior is necessarily bad,
right?
But because that's going to allow you to see two very important things. If you are creating a boundary or a rule that says, hey, don't follow me in the kitchen, don't follow me in the bathroom right now. Right now, I don't want you on the bed and the couch. It's not that I mind it. I just want to create a rule that says no more. if I find that,
can you stop a behavior or reduce a behavior? Is what you were talking about. Yeah.
If every time I go to the kitchen, I come back, you're still there. If every time I try to sit on the couch, you're still trying to get up, and I'm actively trying to create a rule that says we're not doing this anymore, and my dog's not listening, it's hinting at one of two things. Either my communication is not as clear as I think it is because the dog has no idea what I'm asking of it.
Right.
Or he or she knows exactly what I'm asking, but is not prioritizing my information.
Right.
And if that's the case, why? Most of the time, that's predicated on how we live with the dog. If the dog gets to do what it wants when it wants inside the house, why the hell would it listen to us outside?
Exactly.
Well, you know, and there's a couple things there that, as you guys are kind of talking about this, it makes me want to like unpack a couple things for listeners. So number one, that for the longest time was mine and Brent's most popular episode on the podcast, which was tips for structure. Because I think in the dog training world, one thing that I think is very difficult, which is why I'm so happy to have someone on who like can explain things. Because one thing that's so difficult in the dog training world is a lot of people like say stuff vaguely. You know, your dog needs structure, your dog needs obedience, your dog needs this. And someone who's not a dog trainer is like, okay, but how?
But why?
And I noticed,
right.
Well, and I noticed in particular, even a lot of dog trainers have a hard time explaining. Like if you like tell me what is structure, they're like, well, it's, you know, and they have a hard time figuring out how to put it to words. They know what it is, just like you were talking about, but they can't explain it to someone else. And so,
they may not have broken it down to be like, oh, I see the 10 component pieces that not letting your dog in the kitchen provides, you know, or whatever it is.
Well, and the why, like Blake was just talking about, like, you know, it's, you know, if I were to set a boundary, a very clear boundary, when I go to the kitchen, there is a no zone for my dogs in the kitchen. From when the wood turns into the tile on the floor, my dog does not cross that zone, or like the cabinet line or whatever the case. And then clients are like, why does that work? Why does that help? For exactly what you just said. Well, if a dog is spending all day just catering to their own impulses and never ever having to hold themselves accountable for what you said, why would they listen to you? They just exist in a world where anything they want, they do.
Yeah.
You know, that's another thing though too, from a distraction standpoint. They go, well, yeah, but I just want my dog to just like come when called, and like it always chases.
Right.
Like, well, let me ask you a question. Have you ever, like I said before, have you ever tried giving direction inside your house that allows you to fail safely?
Right.
That I wanted to talk to you about. That is something I wanted you to talk to you about.
That's so important to understand that like a client is not a professional dog trainer. And even as professional dog trainers, we make mistakes and we will continue to make mistakes.
Right.
You need a safe environment where you can fuck up.
Yep.
And if you do make those mistakes, you go, good to know I'm not quite there yet. But for example, if you have a dog that like goes bananas USA when you come home, create a rule that says, hey, we're not going to do that right now. Or maybe now we can do it and now we can't. But if you can't even stop your dog from jumping up on you excitedly, why would you be able to stop it from when a guest comes over? Or why would a dog listen to you here or here? If you can't get these things inside the house first, you're not going to get them outside.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense.
Because it's a controlled environment. It's a laboratory. Like you can't get results there.
Well, and it also falls into the relationship because it's practice, but the more that you practice helping your dog control their impulses by way of giving them clear communication that this is not acceptable right now, not only do they practice the actual skill set of not jumping on someone, even though they're excited and they learn how to calm them down actively. That's a skill the dog can learn in and of themselves.
Yeah.
But so is the communication tool of like, oh, I would, but Dad said no. And that comes with the relationship aspect because like we mentioned before, dogs are smart, kind of like a kid. They can know what you want and choose not to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Real quick. So going back to the failing safely. So like 6-7 months ago, I was watching your content and I saw the failing safely video where you were explaining to some client failing safely. And obviously as dog trainers, like I don't like saying the same script over and over. Like you do it for a couple of weeks and I get bored. Then I go, how else can I explain this? And that's just how I like to do it. So, you know, someone who did a lesson with me 6 months ago is not getting the same lesson 2 months later, you know? And that's just because I like to figure shit out. Right. But when I came across that video and I was like, failing safely, that sounds dope. I stole that for like a whole 3 weeks. And I don't use it anymore, but it was such a great, you know, it defines itself, you know, it's one of those terms that defines itself. And so for the people who aren't listening, can you describe what failing safely is?
Yeah, absolutely.
For people who are listening, sorry, did I say aren't?
So if we're looking at the idea of failing safely is you're going to try to do something different than what you normally do. Dog normally does this, dog normally does that. I'm going to give you direction that goes against your impulsive instinct. And it's either going to work great, or when dad comes home or mom comes home and I say, nope, I want you staying there. I don't want you jumping up, or I'd rather you do this, not that. And the dog ends up not listening and jumping up to give my wife or my husband hugs and kisses, whatever it is. I failed, but it's safe because
it's low liability.
You got attacked with hugs and kisses.
Right.
You see what I mean? Or if like, oh, well, you don't understand, my dog is not good with my husband or my wife, whatever, then that's fine. Then try to do something with you. You try to create a rule that says, hey, when I sit down and watch Game of Thrones, this area where the area rug is and the coffee table.
You have to be on the wood.
Yeah, I just don't want you here. It's not that it's bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's not that you're never allowed here. Right now, this is off limits. But you can't get that. You failed, but you failed safely because it's not that big of a deal. You need to try and see where you stand, because when you look at things outside, what are we going to do outside? We're going to try to correct something. And that's, I also have a different way that I like to explain a correction, because a lot of people will pop or try to interrupt or these things or try to redirect. For me, a correction is not just a punishment. A correction is you're correcting something. You're fixing something that is wrong.
Right.
So if you're looking to fix something that is wrong, most of the time your direction is very simple. Not that.
Right. Instead, do this. Right.
Yeah. That's it. That's it. Not that.
Michael Ellis calls it a block. You're blocking behaviors.
And you know what too? I think that's even that right there. Like, as I think of other trainers that we like just follow and stuff, just to kind of see what's out there. I don't see enough of a delineation there. I think the easiest way that I personally have been describing it is, if you're going to correct in order to block a behavior or pull a dog out of whatever it is that they're focusing on, once the correction is done, a correction is just the block. Once that's done and you have the dog's attention,
give the directive.
It's still, it's still your job to do something with this attention. Otherwise dogs are just like bark, bark. Sorry, what? Oh, anyway, bark, bark. And it's just, and they just go right back to it, So yeah, I'm glad that you brought that up. And I wanted to ask you something. So since we're talking about failing safely, I also wanted to bring up from the perspective of the newer dog trainer and of the dog owner. A lot of times, I'm sure in jiu-jitsu too, you fail safely in practice because in tournament time, it's like it matters. I noticed that a lot of newer trainers and a lot of owners, they don't like to fail safely because they just don't like to fail. So not only by showing them safe ways to do it, can they do it repeatedly without issue, but just by you saying it, hey, look, this is how you're going to fail safely. You're going to let them know, like, oh, okay, I guess he's expecting me to fail. I guess it's not that big a deal, because people have that weird pressure that they put on themselves and their dogs of like, I've never, it's been quarantine. I've never had a guest here before, but when they get here, I'm pretty confident he's going to be perfect for some reason, but people don't like to not be good at something, So I like the fact that just the concept, just the wording of failing safely makes it okay for people to fail.
I set people up. I let them know, like, you're not going to be perfect. And I don't expect you to walk out of a training session or a board and train program a professional dog trainer. It's not going to happen. You're going to make mistakes. So let's make sure when you're making these mistakes, you're making them wisely, you're making them smart. And at the very least, if you are in more of a real world situation and you're expecting or hoping that the dog is going to perform a certain way, you are prepared to ensure and get the behavior in the event that the dog doesn't do it on its own.
Right.
Because the alternative is then you just ask dogs to do things when they're doing something fucked up.
And going back to that correction, not that this, both are equally important.
Right.
Because if I'm saying not that, and then I'm leaving it open-ended, why not give the dog, hey, this is something that we can do, so that the next time around, if I try to offer that advice and the dog does it, whether I'm making adjustments to do it sooner, give it advice, help the dog find the right path.
Right.
They get to avoid the
correction. Right.
I can just do this without that. Well, why didn't you tell me that? That by itself is important. But alternatively, if I just try to teach the dog the alternative behavior without addressing the mistake, because remember I said, not that, this.
Right.
If I don't address not that, that's a major problem. And that's online today, the idea of reward the good, ignore the bad, and just redirect the behavior by way of we're not going to have the conversation of what you did was wrong.
Right.
That's a big issue. That would be like my daughter. She's 2 years old. She's going through stuff. She's great, and then she's making mistakes, and that's
terrible twos, man.
Yeah, right. I'm shooting for terrific twos.
Terrific twos, yes. I mean, you are a dog trainer, of course.
He's drawing on our refrigerator.
Yep.
Right? And as she's drawing in a Sharpie,
oh no!
I go. Well, here's some ice cream. Boom, and I redirect her. Now she's not drawing on the fridge.
And you're just like, yoink, give me that.
and she gets it. That's great. Now I have her doing something better. But nowhere in that conversation did we talk about you can't. I don't want to see you doing this again.
Right.
Both are equally important, and that's dog training. The more communication that you can give and not limit a dog to, the better it's going to be.
Correct. And I wanted to add something to that. This was another thing. I was doing a group class today, and another thing that I thought of today that I've thought of before, but I've never like said it to a class before, was an interesting thing is like, what is, and I made this joke to them. I was like, I promise you guys, this makes sense. Just stick with me. What does it mean to improve one's cardio? If you're running, if you're swimming, if you're biking, your lungs don't like get bigger. Why can you run faster for longer? Part of it is like physiologically, you make new connections. Like you get from A to B quicker because you've got like bigger and stronger veins that push oxygen better. But the other aspect, and this really holds true for swimming, building cardio for swimming, your body doesn't hold more. Your lungs don't get bigger. Your body gets more efficient with the amount of oxygen that it always had. So you can swim harder for longer with less breath, with the same amount of oxygen as ever. And so when you talk about, and this is what I was telling them, because we were working with a couple of Neapolitan Mastiff puppies who they're Neos, they're very barky, and so any little person, any little thing that they see, yap, 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 And so we were talking about redirecting, we were talking about corrections down the line, we were talking about all this stuff and like when and how it's all appropriate. And part of the process was, like you were talking about, if we want to build efficiency with the same effort, you address it the one time with the proper correction to block it and then redirect it. That way, next time, if you, like you said, whatever the adjustment is, sooner or farther away or something, the dog makes that adjustment minus the correction. That's efficiency.
Yeah.
And then from there, so now the way that I explained it to them was like, so now we've taken this situation from potentially like a negative to at least neutral. The dog doesn't have to love whoever that is, but they're just not worried about it. Just do what I'm saying and you're good. Now we have the possibility to make it a positive. What if the dog makes that correction by themselves? And then I can go and actively create a situation to reward. It's as easy as, hey, sit. And they're going to sit because they're focused. And then boom, here's your treat. Good man, you sat, there you go. So that was some, and honestly, I'm excited to hear, or rather I'm happy / not surprised to hear that you and Tyler are friends, because my favorite thing about Tyler Muto before we had him on, the moment that really stuck out to me, and I've talked about this with like 5 other guests, so forgive me, everybody, is I was watching him do
jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, jiu-jitsu. Yeah. So I was watching him. Damn, you guys are. I was watching him do a video where there was like the camera person over here, a little elevated like platform dog bed here, and he was working e-collar place commands with this dog that wasn't new to training and wasn't new to place, but was new to place with remote collar. So he's working it. He does a few reps, place good off, place good off. And this is something that really stuck out to me.
Yeah.
He puts the dog in place, leaves the dog there. He walks away to the camera to like explain something like this. And the dog does one of these, and they slowly take their paw off the bed, like unsure, and kind of put it on the floor. Yep. He realizes this is happening. He doesn't say no. He doesn't correct with the collar. All he does, while still talking to the camera, takes like 2 steps back toward the dog, and the dog goes, no correction, no nothing, releases him, resets, and the dog does not make the same mistake again for the rest of the lesson. And he explained after the fact, so you guys may have noticed I did not correct this dog. That was on purpose, because sometimes you got to let little things like this go for the sake of not only the momentum of this particular lesson, but for the momentum of the entirety of the exercise. I want dogs to not be afraid to try things, not be afraid to make mistakes. I want them to be in a calm enough frame of mind that their cup isn't full with like fear and anxiety, so that if I take a step in, they take the hint and they go, okay. And so keeping it even keeled like that, I think falls into efficiency as well, because a newer trainer, like when I was a younger trainer, I would have corrected the dog for that because I didn't know any better.
Yeah.
And it would have stressed the dog out, and the dog would have likely have had a more rough lesson than Tyler's dog did.
Interesting.
You know,
Well,
and
exactly what you're just explaining is failing safely for the dog.
right,
Ultimately.
right. But you know, but again, it falls into the pressure of a newer trainer not wanting to fail and not wanting the dog to fail. And that's also why I have such a gripe with like the advertisee dog training, 2 weeks, any dog, anything, because what ends up happening with it is 2 weeks, man. Like, really? I met a company that was like 2 weeks, any dog, any issue, any age, any whatever. It's strictly e-collar. There is no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Strictly 2 weeks, no ifs, ands, or buts about it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, dude,
and to be clear, these are the 2 weeks we promise everything, people. There, you can do 2 weeks foundation stuff and then privates after, right?
No, this was everything, beginning to end, everything. And I was like, really? What if the dog is like 3 months old and new to everything? Oh, e-collar, you know, blah, blah. And the way that I met these people, by the way, again, I was new to Arizona. I interviewed with them. So they were asking me about my knowledge base. I was like, oh, I'm super good with e-collar. I'm super good with food, super good with leash. And they were going through like hypotheticals. Okay, so if we were to hire you, let's say we gave you a German Shepherd puppy that's 4 months old and needs to do this, how would you go about it? Oh, well, I'm going to start him with food and I'm going to teach him this. And I want to do some tug with him. I want to build some drive and some focus. And it's a Shepherd. Let's have some fun. And then I'll move him to e-collar on the back end, you know, for everything else. And they're like, yeah, but since we only have 2 weeks, we typically start e-collar day 1.
Fuck.
And I'm like, yeah, no, you know, and they were like, okay, what if you have like a 11-month-old dog, just bit the mom in the face or whatever, you know? And I'm like, well, similar, I'm going to start some rapport. Maybe I'll see if I can get away with food work. Some dogs are too nervous to want to do food off the bat. So I'll try leash stuff. I'll try walks. I'll try something. I'll try this or that. And they're like, well,
you were too balanced for them.
But the same thing happened though. They're like, yeah, but we only have 2 weeks. You remember that, blah, 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 you know? And I'm like, okay, let me put an e-collar on this dog and get my ass bitten then. Like, I guess that's what we're going to do. Right. But that really threw me off because just based on this program, their trainers must be stressed out. How are you going to give this person a puppy and in 2 weeks e-collar train this dog with an off-leash guarantee? That doesn't happen, you know? So to me, it's just like, imagine the stress that the dog must have to go through.
The thing that's not fair is you're assuming, not you, but they are assuming that every single dog is at the same starting point. And that's really not fair in any shape or form. That would be like, you have an out of shape athlete.
Right.
An out of shape professional athlete can blow the average person out of the water if they go, just start with a quick 2-mile jog and then we're going to jump to this. Where there's some people that can't even walk 2 miles.
Yeah.
So like, you have to understand, like, the journey and the route that we want to take might be the same, but the starting point might be different based on what we have in front of us. And we have to be able to consider that.
Right. Well, that
2-week programs don't do. You know?
One thing that Michael Ellis and Larry Crone really brought up to us, which I love that we have the opportunity to talk to people because they sometimes give you like the words, you know what I mean? And what Michael Ellis said that really stuck with us was, can Blake Rodriguez do it with any tool, any dog, any time? Yeah, probably. Can he realistically expect the client to replicate this? That's kind of unfair. And like you said, 2 weeks, like, you know, why wouldn't you just give the dog an extra week? That way the poor thing can start with food and have some fun. And not only that, but like we talked about in the very beginning of the episode, giving the dog more time is going to speak directly to long-term success, better retention, more fun with the program, which means also better retention, which means also more engagement, less stress, therefore less likelihood of things going sideways down the line that you then have to go and fix, and therefore less risk for everybody. So it's frustrating then if you can't tell, it's frustrating then that trainers who mean well, I'm not talking about this company, I'm talking about other trainers who they mean well. They're not the like cookie cutter dog trainers. Any dog works on any, you know, every single dog's an e-collar dog, period. They're the like, I listen to other trainers. I take advice. I signed up for Consider the Dog. I like Sarah Brewski. I do my thing. But I really get uncomfortable because I'm not confident enough to ask for the 3rd week, even though I know the dog needs it.
Week or the 5th
the 4th week or the 5th week. It's more money. It's more this, it's more that. The owners are going to be upset because they don't get their dog back. We're talking an extra, like what, $700 to like $1,000 or whatever a weekly is. And they don't ask for the time, which again means inadvertently on accident. I'm not like demonizing them, but Now they're stressed out, which means they got to pressure the dog to meet this weird deadline, which means the dog's stressed out, the retention ain't there, and blah, blah, blah. And so we've been really trying to find the words. So back me up here if you agree that it's okay to ask for the appropriate amount of time to get the job done right by the dog.
Yeah, well, the thing, I agree with you. And I think the thing that is important is you have to set yourself up to be able to do your job and not seem like you're trying to upsell somebody
right.
when a dog is not where they need to
100%.
be.
Right.
Important with like the promises. If somebody goes, well, what do you promise? Where do you promise this dog to be or this and by this time? And you guys were speaking about Michael Ellis, and he's an incredible individual. Like, not only is he a good dog trainer, he's a good dude. Like,
we picked up on that.
Down to earth individuals.
Yeah. Larry Crone said that, and he said also the best part about visiting Michael Ellis is the Chinese food or the Asian food.
Oh, the Chinese food in the area. Yeah.
He said there's good Asian food in the area.
Listen, you're never not gonna have you will always have a conversation with Larry, and somehow food will enter the conversation.
Yeah.
100%.
He was talking about Peruvian food. He's talking about Chinese food.
Yeah, he called me out. He goes, Brent, where's your family from? And I was like, from Peru. And he goes, I fucking knew it.
That's funny. That's so funny. He's a character, man. He's
a good guy. He's a really good guy.
Family. But going back to Ellis,
sorry to cut you off. Yeah, go ahead.
He said something. Gosh, I don't remember what year it was. It was during an IACP. Had to have been when I presented. It was maybe 4 years ago when he presented. At the time, it might have been like 6 years ago or something like that. Mm-hmm. And he said something that rubbed a lot of trainers the wrong way, but he was 100% right. And he goes, so I've watched him present at IACP twice. Mm-hmm. And the second time was super, super, like, it was like he thought it through. The first time he kind of just went up and was like, just spoke, but it was also really important. But he had made this comment that nobody is going to rehabilitate a dog in a board and train. I don't care who you are. I don't care what you're doing. You will not rehabilitate this dog, like a full rehabilitation, especially in like 2 week, 3 week period. It's not
right.
And then like that rubbed people the wrong way that were doing board and trains, because they were like, no, what do you mean? I'm helping the dog and this and that. But he was right. Because what is the goal of the board and train program? And this brings us back to what you were talking about, is when you set someone up with realistic expectations of like, we're going to get your dog better. We're going to look to get the dog to as good of a point as we possibly can. Mm-hmm. Where that dog would be, I can give you a rough estimate, but I don't know, because I don't really know your dog yet. Right. But I know that your dog is going to be light years ahead of where they are now.
Yeah. Right.
And at this time frame, whether that's 6 weeks, whether that's 8 weeks, whether that's 3 weeks, 3 is the least that we do, but that's not a problematic dog. That's like
right, like a baseline,
little cupcake,
right?
You know?
Just to get the dog to a better place before I start working with the owner. Right. But at this 6 week mark, let's say, or just before that, I'm gonna let you know where the dog is and where they are not, and then I'm gonna have a very honest conversation about like, look, can the dog benefit from more time? What dog can't?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Like what dog isn't? Of course the dog. And like, would I love to have the dog for longer? Of course. But does the dog need to stay longer?
Right.
And what do I base that off of? Are we at a place with this dog where I go, you know what? This dog is in a good enough spot where we can start now working on you and developing your relationship with the dog and your starting point. Is this enough of a place where you feel comfortable being able to start from scratch with you and so on and so forth? And also with the specific circumstances that you're dealing with, is the dog in a place where it's realistic for you to take over? Or do I go,
right.
I think we need to get the dog to a little bit of a better place. I'm always shooting for perfection, but I don't expect perfection. Is this dog in a good enough spot where we go, okay, let's move on from here? Or do I say, hey, listen, I think we need more time? I would love more time, but I'm not trying to drain your pocket.
Right.
Exactly.
Like, you know what I mean? We have to, there's so many things to consider in the pet dog world that it's beyond what we can get, what we can accomplish. And we have to consider the circumstances, the finances, the owner, what they're going through, their work environment. There's just a lot to it. So for me, going back to the board and train, I'm very upfront about this is what we can expect. This is what we're going to shoot for. This is the conversation we'll have before the program is over.
We'll keep you updated, and we'll keep you
keep you updated, and we'll decide collectively if you want to do this. This is what we'll do. If you don't, that's fine. But this is where we are, and this is what we can expect.
Right.
That changes everything. You know.
Yeah. Can I get you, Blake, to if this sounds weird, what you just said makes
It already does.
okay. Good. Here, the way that you just described that makes total sense to me, and the way that you would describe that to a client makes total sense to me. And I think that a younger dog trainer that we were just discussing that would not feel comfortable having that conversation, I think could really benefit from what you just said. So, what I then wanted to ask you was, could you give maybe one more example for a newer trainer who knows they need more time? How would you go about explaining exactly what you just explained? Just one
to a client,
to like for a newer trainer to a client.
For a new trainer, like what is their job? Okay. How do they feel more comfortable?
Like give them a blueprint, a rough one, like even what you just did was served as an example.
Some principles,
right? Or some principles of like, listen, if you think the dog honestly needs more time, and I totally agree with what you're saying about like there's a worth it factor, right? There's like a diminishing returns element to it of like the dog's good enough, you can go home, or I would like one more week, then the dog can go home. I'm not here to drain you, but I am here to do my job that you hired me to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, the thing that's most important, and it sounds so cliche, but it's true, is you have to be honest.
Yep, 100%. Yep.
Like I agree. You have to be honest, and if you're honest with them, and you go, "Hey, listen, this is I'm calling you or I'm emailing you right now." I like to talk over the phone for stuff like this because
100%. You have to have the emotional.
Yeah.
And that's maybe the newer generation doesn't know that. The newer generation may not know.
This is where we are. I'm honest with them, and I go, listen, Sparky is doing fantastic. Obviously, as you've seen, and this is a big thing for me, is we're really transparent. My team more so now than me. I have my Instagram page which follows me where I am and what I'm doing right now. I'm in Florida. I do more personal, intimate board and trains where the dog becomes a member of the family and lives with me, with my wife, with my kid. We have a baby number 2 on the way too, and all this.
Nice. Very cool, man. So dope.
With my kids, with my dogs, for whatever reason, and there's benefits to that. I do that here, and that follows me. But my team is always showing what we're doing with the board and train. So as you've seen, like this is not. I'm not selling you because like, oh man, we're not making progress with this dog. Your dog is playing with dogs now, or your dog is walking with dogs, and your dog is playing with us, or is off leash. You're seeing these things. What I would like more time with is this because of so on and so forth. So it's just a matter of being able to articulate and explain things and be honest with it. That's really what it is. Right now where we are, I feel like I'm not quite sure if this drive or this motivation or this is realistic for you to take over. We're at a place where we made so much progress. I expect things. Who knows how we're going to do it? I think that the biggest advice is be honest with your clients and let them in so that they see that.
So they see the process. Don't have that veil, like Wizard of Oz, where they don't see what's going on.
Yeah, like let them see that you care and you actually give a shit. And this is where you are, where you aren't, what you would like to do, what you would like to work on, and also get their opinion and get their feedback. Because hey, if you do decide to. We do, end the program tomorrow or next week. This is what sessions moving forward would be like. This is what we can expect. This is where your dog is, where your dog isn't, and this is where I would have you getting started. Just be real. Just be real.
Here's another question for you. So I'm sure having built a business and just getting better as a dog trainer and a jiu-jitsu practitioner, it would seem to me, I think Brent would agree, and you tell me if you agree or disagree. Progress and stuff like that, progress in work and progress in BJJ and all different kinds of stuff can a lot of times be limited with personal growth progress. And with that being said, my question to you is, when getting comfortable, being honest, because it sounds weird to say on a podcast, but it's scary sometimes, right? So when getting comfortable, being honest, being upfront with clients or just in general, are there any other influences or books or things that you've read outside of the realm of dog training that have helped you in that realm, that have in turn helped you everywhere else?
I don't know if I've ever been asked that question before.
Exclusive here on the Dog Trainers podcast.
In regards to being honest,
Well, in regards to the growth associated with furthering your business, it can be honesty, it can be transparency, it can be being comfortable enough to put yourself out there in the form of video. Like an example, for me, I really like Jim Rohn. Brent really loves Tony Robbins. Like people who aren't dog trainers, but they kind of give you that push to just go, do, and be upfront and and kind of show who you are and all that good stuff. So that
Oh
because when
man.
your authentic self comes out, then people feel that you actually care.
Right.
Well, there's so much. Like there's Jocko, there's like Joe Rogan.
Mhm.
Obviously, you guys like
He's
you're
dope.
doing podcasts. Like like
He's
that
the
guy,
king.
Rogan by himself. Like
Yeah.
he's so connected to so much from like
Right.
martial arts to this to that to like hanging with
He has a
Elon
great
Musk.
sidekick. Great sidekick.
Yeah, like his sidekick is something. Just surrounding yourself by that, like Goggins,
Yeah, I like
Jocko,
Goggins. Yeah.
Rogan. You have Zig Ziglar, you have
Right.
Jim Rohn. Oh man,
Gary V's. Come on,
getting
shout out Gary.
Gary Vaynerchuk, Gary V. Like I like that guy. Like there's so many people, but Brene Brown. Like there
I
Yep.
love Brene Brown.
many like people to just get your mind right and just and help you make not only yourself better but make your team better and
Yep.
and really allow you to look at yourself and assess yourself and try to make
Right.
yourself a better person, which is sometimes hard.
Yeah. Well, and I think one thing that helped me as a younger dog trainer is to know that you are not the problem. Right. Like there are variables outside of yourself that has made the dog the way they are. Right. Because there used to always be this pressure as a younger dog trainer where I was like, I got to fix it. I care about this dog. I don't want this dog to get put down or whatever it is. And it's like, understand that it's more than you. So it's almost kind of like a check to your ego, but also your insecurities
Right.
at the same time. And it's just like, you have to, like, I had a client recently who dog usually about midway to a program, I start the owners doing sessions with the dog so that way they can start developing the right. And it's so funny, in that midway session I start seeing like, oh, separation anxiety goes both ways, because a week and a half into that program, this woman was like, I'm ready to pick up my dog and I need to, you know what, I looked at the pictures and his eyes were just so sad and
So
whatever,
sad.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, so I had to call her and I'm like, hey, lovely lady, love her, she's we're great friends now, but that happens. And when she came, and she was very attached to the dog was very attached to her. This dog was like a little Maltipoo, biting everything, biting humans, attacking dogs, chasing skateboarders, doing all the bad things that a dog could actually do. But because he was this big, she just picked him up and kept him from stuff, right? And she just rescued this dog a month prior. So this dog came to her with these issues. She just had a big heart and fell in love with the dog. And so midway through, I saw that this dog, after doing great on leash, doing great with the other dogs, playing with other dogs, being balanced, being able to be inside the house, responding to all his commands, responding to all his boundaries, as soon as she walks in, all of a sudden it's like crack, it's you. And he starts freaking out. And had I not sent her videos of his progress, she would have thought I was a con artist of some sort, right?
Right.
And so I had to explain it. I said, you saw the videos logically. You saw this logically. We're going to go for a walk. We're just going to start with a walk. This dog wouldn't stop saying, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up, pick me up. And it's so funny how deep some of these relationship issues and habits go, where had she not been on board, I told her all of these things up front, almost like I predicted the path, because I've done this long enough, or I've been able to say, this could happen, that could happen, this could happen. And I put it all out on the table. Had I not sent her those videos, had I not been upfront with his progress, had I not, I didn't sugarcoat anything the first week. Yeah, he's having some trouble. He's not eating all of his food. We're hand feeding him. He had a little bit of stress colitis, like, this, that, there's a lot of things. I was up front and I said, but he's going to get through this. Right. And so when I called her on day 10 and I connected again with her, she was ready to pull her dog out of a 6-week program. Right.
Oh, wow.
And she was ready to pull out. And I said, listen, this is normal. This is part of the process. This is, we see it time and time again. You have to just, this is the case. And the cool thing is she came from a discipline of fitness where she would like help people get better and lose hundreds of pounds. And so it's cool to be able to tap into someone else's discipline, where I said, the first 2 weeks are the hardest with the dog. first 2 weeks is tough because that's where they're transitioning. That's where they're learning new skills, and they're just trying to feel where they are in the system. And I said, he's very happy here. He's very happy. So I had to send her pictures of him playing at day 10 and all this stuff. And had I not been transparent, but honest, right? Had I not told her he's not perfect, but he's getting better. He's not perfect, but he's getting better. And I remember when I was a younger dog trainer, I always wanted to have this like, oh, he's fine. They're doing great. He's doing wonderful.
Right.
But that being honest is the key. Is just being upfront with people, so that way you're not blowing smoke up their ass. So that way, if I do need the extra week, I ask for the extra week, and they understand that it's part of that process.
Right. It doesn't come out of left field.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to the Dog Trainers Podcast, a podcast created by dog trainers, for dog trainers, or anyone who's ever fallen in love with man's best friend.
We really hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and we hope to see you back for the next one. But in the meantime, please follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Dog Trainers Podcast. Go ahead and leave a comment. Ask us any questions that you want. We would love to connect with our dog trainer communities all around the world. Take care, guys. We'll see you next time.